In this video, I can't seem to get this charger to work with my car. No, I'm just joking. I know it's a petrol car. My other EV, apart from the MG ZS EV, is a BMW i3, and it's a little bit broken at the moment. It's gone in for both some recall work. The KLE, the charging electronics, need to be replaced as part of a recall that BMW have done to a number of i3s, including mostly of the early 60 amp hour type like I've got. And it's also in for a new aircon condenser because it seems it's been leaking. So BMW have very kindly given me this 420i Gran Coupe to drive whilst the i3's in getting worked on. And let's have a look and see what I think of it, shall we? So, obviously, it's a petrol car, but we'll talk about that a bit about that later. It's a fairly nice looking thing. I'm a bit confused by it. It appears to be the 4 Series was a two-door, the two-door 3 Series sort of became the 4 Series, and now this is a 4-door 4 Series, the Gran Coupe they call it. A little bit odd, but there we are. It's a fairly fetching looking thing. Obviously this is a 2019 model, so it managed to avoid getting the huge grille. I think the grille actually looks quite good on this one. And it's fairly stylish. I think the 2-door version does look a bit better than this 4-door, but there we are. And it's a fairly good spec one. I'll close this. Just taking the clickbait thumbnail. So, but let's get in and go for a drive, get away from this charger in case anybody wants to use it, and we'll have a look at the 4 Series, shall we? This car's actually been supplied by Enterprise. If you watched my last video, you know that me and Enterprise aren't the best of friends at the moment after the rather disgusting van that they gave me recently. But I didn't really have a choice in the matter, so it turns out that Enterprise provide any loan vehicles when BMW are carrying out recall work. You get a hire car from Enterprise if you need a courtesy car. So I couldn't really say no, and to be fair, it is a little bit nicer than that van, so can't complain too much. It's 2019 420i Gran Coupe XDrive, so it's 4-wheel drive. I guess for those that buy a BMW but are a little bit scared of getting stuck in some snow, whatever. So a 2-litre petrol engine generates about 181 horsepower, I think, 0 to 60 in 7.7. And really, I mean, the worst thing about it is when you turn it on, it makes this horrible noise. I don't see the need for it myself, but anyway, let's go for a drive and see what it's like, shall we? I must say it is fairly well appointed in here. It's, you know, nice leather seats, like typical sort of Germanic interior, lots of black, but all feels very solid and very nice. You definitely know you're in a BMW. Prior, as you know, if you've been following this channel right from the start, you'll know that I had a 2018 3 Series Touring when I started out, before I discovered the benefits of having an electric vehicle. I had a dirty diesel for a bit, and I must say I do like a BMW interior, and this one is no exception. It's very, very similar to that 3 Series was. I guess that makes sense given it's just a coupe version of that, but certainly a nice place to sit. Anyway, let's go, shall we? So performance wise, I mean, it's fairly brisk. That says 60 mile an hour now, just come off around about 60 mile an hour, fairly short order, but it makes a lot of fuss about it, you know. I think when you get used to the instantaneous torque and the fact that an EV has that power delivery straight away, you going back to something with a gearbox, even though the 8-speed ZF automatic in this is pretty good, you definitely find yourself wanting for more. But it's no slouch, this, you know, 0 to 60 in 7.7. It's fairly fast, but certainly off the line you're just waiting for the gearbox to catch up and do its thing. And I mean, that's probably about as good an automatic gearbox as you're going to get. The other negative point I must say is the road noise, which you get in any car, even the i3 itself that's in, you know, that's in getting repaired, you notice the road noise, and that's a lot to do with the tyres. So that this particular vehicle, like a lot of BMWs, has got Bridgestone run flat tyres on it, and they are notorious for being quite noisy. And certainly my 3 Series was the same. You notice quite a lot of roar from them, and obviously that could probably be made a bit better by putting different tyres on, but they certainly they come with Bridgestones from the factory. But I suppose you either need to put up with that or go to the expense of changing the tyres if you want something a little bit quieter. I don't know how much difference you're going to make that you wouldn't just wait until the tyres needed replacing and then maybe think about it. I certainly don't think you're going to scrap perfectly good tyres just because they're a little bit loud. But one thing I will say, it certainly feels fairly planted. I guess the 4-wheel drive system's going some way with that. I don't know. I assume it's one of these part-time 4-wheel drive where you rear-wheel drive some of the time, but then if you need the extra traction, it shifts the power around. I don't actually know, but that's what I'm assuming. Most modern all-wheel drive vehicles are like that these days, especially when it's a car that's got 4-wheel drive and not actually sort of dedicated 4x4. But it certainly feels very sure-footed, very planted. You show it a bend or two, and it's not out of its depth. It feels good. It feels exactly as you'd expect from a car of this caliber. I mean, it's not a sports car, but I guess BMW would tell you it's a sports coupe, so you certainly expect it to be able to handle, and it doesn't, wallow about. And I think definitely, if I was going to compare it to my ZS EV, whilst the power delivery isn't as urgent, it definitely handles better, and it definitely feels a lot more sure-footed. It doesn't wallow around. The ZS definitely not built for going through the twisty stuff, whereas this certainly feels a lot more at home. It's a pretty miserable evening for this. Obviously, I've only got this car for a day or two, so if I was going to film something with it, I'd need to do it regardless of the weather. So you'll need to be a little bit careful on some of these roads, so that I can't push it too hard to test out the handling too much, because whilst there isn't an insurance excess on the rental, I don't particularly want to have to explain to them how I managed to wrap it around a tree. Not the best look. And if they don't want to deal with me after seeing my last video, they definitely wouldn't want to deal with me if I managed to bend this quite severely, I don't think so. On the cleanliness front, I don't know how much you'll be able to see from the camera angle you have. I'll try and pan around the 360 thing, and I'll take some photos as well. It's not spotless in here. It's certainly nowhere near as bad in terms of cleanliness as that Vauxhall Vivaro was that I featured in my last video, where I gave Enterprise a little bit of a slating. I'm still not sure I would call it complete clean, and would bang on about how great my cleaning protocols were. It certainly, looks like it's seen some cleaning in its life, but I wouldn't say it was immaculate. I certainly wouldn't say that it had been deeply sanitised or anything like that. There's a little bit of grubbiness on the seats and stuff, but definitely nothing like that van. And I think it would be unfair to say that it's not clean. I just don't think that it's been thoroughly sanitised. But I'm guessing that they have time pressures, and I'm guessing that vehicles are in and out so quickly that they don't actually get the chance to clean them properly. And if that is the way they run their business, then that is unfortunate. And I think that they could certainly do better to change that, and that's something I think they need to look at. But I can't complain. It's bearable. It's perfectly fine. But I think if you were fussy about cleanliness and were expecting it to be absolutely pristine, it's not. I've got a different kind of range anxiety when I'm driving this, because obviously, I'm sure many people will point out in the comments, the range of this car will be several hundred miles. I mean, I don't know, 500 miles maybe, if you fill the tank up. But it was delivered to me with basically no fuel in it whatsoever, with a warning light on, and I was told to basically give it back to them with that amount of fuel in, and that's how they operate. It was the same with the van. The van had half a tank in, and I had to give it back to them with half a tank. And I always hate that, because it's a lot easier if they just give you it full and you fill it up before you hand it back. Certainly your chances of paying for fuel you're not going to use are a lot lower. But in this case, I need to hand it back to them with as little fuel in as possible. So we've definitely shortened the usable range of this car, because I don't want to fill it up too much. Thankfully I'm not going too far in it, but it's certainly quite an interesting take on range anxiety. It's more about being tight and not wanting to give the rental company any fuel for free, rather than the car not being capable of it. I will note that it says that this thing's only doing 30 miles to the gallon, and that's the long-term average, over a couple of thousand miles or so. Now, it is a rental car, and I'm almost certain it'll have been driven like one for most of its life. I don't know if that's good for a 420i. I'm guessing it'll be well under the book figure, but then the book consumption figures are often pretty rubbish, aren't they? But at 30 miles to the gallon, it's not a cheap thing to run. 30 miles to the gallon and £555 for tax on a car that was more than 40 kilometres new. It's an expensive game for what is, it's a nice car, but it's not earth moving, you know. It's fairly dull. I mean, I guess it looks the part. If you want something that looks a bit flash, and it's certainly a nice place to spend some time, then it's alright, but it's for the kind of money that's involved, I don't know if it'd be my first choice. I've actually been quite surprised with how much you get used to driving cars that have regenerative braking. So see, this doesn't, obviously. And what I find with this ZF 8-speed box is it doesn't have a lot of engine braking either. It will roll long distances, and I guess that is, you know, an efficiency move. I think it actually coasts. I think it switches itself into neutral to save fuel, and you'll coast along for longer. But it certainly takes a bit getting used to as a driver, because you're expecting it to slow down, and it doesn't, and it rolls on for longer. And I can't say I ever noticed it too much when I had my 3 Series, but coming into this from either the MG or the i3, you definitely notice that it doesn't start slowing down when you lift off, and you've got to actually use the brake pedal a bit more than you're used to. You get used to it fairly quickly, but the first couple of times when you need to slow down and you just lift off and nothing happens, it certainly takes a bit getting used to. Don't be gentle, it's a rental. I really must bring you some stuff on the i3 once it comes back from the spa. I think you'd probably be quite interested in it. It's a 2014 60 ampere range extender, and it's been a fairly dependable part of the family for this 6 or 9 months we've owned it. I don't drive it very often. It's definitely the other half's car. She's quite protective over it. I don't get a chance to drive it very often, apart from when it needs fixing, and I'm the person that needs to take it to the garage. But it's a very, very good little thing. I think it'd be quite good for some of you with range anxiety, because you've got the petrol comfort blanket. So I'll definitely, once it's back, I'll need to bring you some i3 content. I think it's long overdue. It's a fun little thing. Absolute riot to drive. The sort of urgency it has and stuff is just brilliant. But it's having some quite severe surgery at the moment. They're swapping out the KLE, they call it the convenience charging electronics. I believe it is literally the AC charger. Is my understanding, is that's what it is. And apparently there's a problem with it where they corrode and they stop working. So BMW are replacing those under a recall. And the air conditioning has stopped working. They've diagnosed that as a faulty condenser. Thankfully, that'll be covered under the warranty. We bought it as an approved used car, so thankfully the warranty will be paying for that, because my understanding is that to replace a condenser at BMW, you're looking at the best part of 750 quid. So I'm quite glad of that warranty, and it'll certainly soften the blow with the i3 ownership experience. I'm led to believe they're quite good at generating bills, which I'm, touch wood, haven't found that out yet, but I think that when I catch a glimpse of what this work would have cost, I think it'll be a stark reminder that an i3 can actually be quite an expensive thing to own, like a lot of BMWs can be if you take them to the dealership for maintenance. I do like the equipment level we've got in here. A nice big widescreen sat-nav with the iDrive interface. It's a bit Marmite. Some people love it, some people hate it. I quite like it. I think once you get used to it, it's reasonably intuitive scrolling through the menus and stuff, just using the one dial rather than farting about with the touchscreen. It's all very responsive and works very well. I'm a big fan. I think especially newer BMWs like this, the latest version of the iDrive, it's really very good. I do notice that the i3, with it being a 2014 model, is not quite as sharp with the menus and stuff, but I think BMW have really got it honed down now. And the days of like the E65 series and the 7 Series of the same era, where I remember Clarkson quite heavily slating it when it first came about because the iDrive was a really confusing, really horrible thing to use. Those days have gone. They really have nailed it now, and the system that's in this is just brilliant. Really, really good. And the sat-nav itself, if you do use it, it's actually pretty good as well. Gets you where you're going, and it's not laggy or horrible. It's really good. It just gets on with it. So there we are. That's the BMW 420i. I mean, this wasn't a serious review, and it was never intended to be. I was just kind of thought I'd bring you my impressions of this rental that I've ended up with. It's definitely not the worst rental car I've ever had. I think Enterprise have moved back up in my estimations just a little bit, but then maybe the fact that it was BMW UK that were paying the bill influences how nice the car is that you end up with. But it's a nice car. Put an electric drivetrain in it and give me a car that drives and handles like this does, but with the benefits you get from an electric drivetrain of the lack of noise and the instant power delivery, and I want one, definitely. But as it stands, I think if the i4 is that, and you were to drive both side by side, I don't know why you'd ever tell me that you'd want a petrol or diesel engine ever again. But time will tell. Time will tell if that's how good if the i4 is going to be. But if the i4 is basically one of these but with an electric drivetrain, it's going to be stonking, I think. That's it for this video. I've got some really good stuff coming up. I've got some really busy days of filming ahead, and hopefully some really interesting stuff. So do stick around. Click the subscribe button if you haven't already. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.